Hey, good morning, girl. How are you doing today? I'm wearing my Alan Hancock college shirt. So today is the 15th of February, 2019. And I wanted to talk today about something that is critically important. And I want to talk about the meaning of life. I want to talk about more than that. I want to talk about the secret to life. It turns out, at least in my view, and all of this is, of course, my view. My view is that the secret to life, the meaning of life, and the purpose of life, those three questions, the answers to those three questions are essentially the same. And so I wanted to give you a little bit of information about my perspective and why I think I'm right. Okay. So, by the way, happy Valentine's Day. I spent my Valentine's Day last night. I went to bed early. I was tired. Um, I've been working out a lot and not getting a lot of sleep because I've been at school learning. And anyway, it was time for a rest. It's one of the reasons I like holidays is that I can rest. Okay, so let's get back to the very important point I'm discussing. So the secret of life. The secret of life, in my view, is positive reframing. Now, the secret of life has changed. It used to be something else. I mean, it was along the same lines, but in the past, like 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, the secret of life had more to do with survival, right? I might have told you something about how to make food or shelter or clothing. And that would really go a long way toward giving you the secret to life. But today, society has progressed. The project of human civilization has really been successful. And we've been able to take care of our most basic needs. And by that, I mean food, shelter, clothing, water. We've done that. And so, as your father, Emily, I would be doing you a disservice if I focused entirely on how for you to gain food, drink, shelter, and clothing. Because, I mean, in today's society, that is pretty much assumed. So all that has done is emphasize another aspect of the secret of life. And it still relates to meeting your needs, right? But the focus now is, instead of on physical needs, the secret of life is a focus on your psychological needs. And so now, let me tell you that the most important needs are your physical needs. That is about the choice to live or not to live. It's about the desire, the purpose, the intent to continue to live and breathe on the planet Earth. And that is essentially the foundation of everything else. So it's really important that you take care of your physical needs. That is the foundation. And that's not necessarily that was the purpose of life. Say 100 years ago, there was a real focus on acquiring the resources to continue to live. But I'm not going to talk about that because, like I mentioned, the project of human civilization has just done such a great job at satisfying our physical needs, it's assumed. And so the focus now is on meeting your psychological needs. Now, your psychological needs, a lot of it has to do with your emotional well-being, right? And it's about meeting your needs. When you meet your needs, you feel happy, content, satisfied, peaceful. When your psychological needs are not getting met, then you feel afraid, sad, angry. In fact, your emotional state is really good. It's a really good measure of how well you're doing in terms of meeting your own psychological needs. Now, first, let me tell you something interesting. When you have all of your psychological needs met, it will appear as if it's really easy to meet your physical needs. In fact, your physical needs will, almost fade to very low basic needs. Essentially, you can become a minimalist. I have a feeling that that's why the most enlightened people are quite often ascetics. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating asceticism. It's not necessary. But anyway, it's a good signal. If you find that you don't need to do as much to stay happy during the day, to meet your psychological needs, that's good. That's a benefit. You're moving on the world efficiently with a low carbon footprint, helping out yourself and the world. And, it's a great indicator. Now, it's not always correct. There are minimalists who are minimalists for all the wrong reasons. And they get themselves into trouble and the people around them into trouble too. So don't fall into this idea that these indicators, like your emotional feelings, your emotional well-being, and your minimalism are the end all be all. It's not actually that. You can be quite self-destructive and be a minimalist and be happy. So you don't want to undermine your long-term survival. You don't want to undermine your long-term interests in the process of through achieving minimalism or achieving happiness at all costs. All right, you want to take in the long view. It's that long-term perspective that's important. Okay, so let me get to the point. Positive reframing. Okay, so let me tell you about the world. Now, I am a lover of the world, and by that I mean physical reality. I am an engineer, a scientist, and I pay close attention. I am basically a worshiper of the atom. I love reality. I'm not necessarily a worshiper of the atom, but I admire and respect the atom. And what I mean by that, I mean that I'm talking metaphorically. I'm not worshiping atoms. Metaphorically, is I honor and respect reality. And reality is made up of atoms and molecules. And as an engineer and physicist, my focus has been on learning as much about reality as possible. And to me, the most important things are F equals ma, PV equals nRT. These are the golden nuggets of wisdom that I've acquired through my studies about reality. And conservation of energy, conservation of mass, conservation of angular momentum, conservation of momentum, the various forces, Maxwell's equations. These, I'm legit in believing that these things exist and are true. Okay, I'm a true believer. I honor reality for all it has to offer. Okay, so one thing you learn in science is that reality is largely impersonal. Things happen, right? The world turns. That's a metaphor for sort of a metaphor for the change that happens in the world, right? So reality happens, and it's largely impersonal. Like when the world rotates, when the earth rotates on its axis, it does not matter. It's not doing so to spite you, to get on your nerves, to get revenge. No, the earth rotates in a form of, as a kind of objective reality. It's completely impersonal. And in fact, I also believe that human relationships are also impersonal. Deep down, human beings and the mechanisms of their mind, their mechanical mechanisms, are just as impersonal. The water molecules in your brain are the same as the ones on the surface of Pluto. They are operating according to F equals ma. Again, I'm speaking metaphorically. F equals ma. These forces are impersonal. And this is what I like to say. The phrase I say is nature is neutral. And when I say nature is neutral, I mean all of nature is neutral. Even the way you operate your brain, completely neutral, at least at some level, right? Just a basic level. So here's the point. The point of this whole story, and I'm getting to that. The point is that reality happens, and it unfolds, it changes, and it's continual. And so the question is, as human beings who have an interest in continuing to live, how do we manage, right? How do we manage this changing impersonal reality as it unfolds? Well, the best way to do it is to keep our bodies healthy and strong and keep our minds sharp, continuously learning about our environment, scanning our environment for threats, and staying alive and helping us to maintain happiness levels that are healthy. And the great thing about happiness, as I was talking yesterday, is that it sort of gives you an expansive view. You want to be in the state of happiness as much of the day as you can, so that you can continue to there are no sticking points. If you're upset about something, you tend to focus like a magnifying glass on a certain problem. This is entirely appropriate. This is the problem-solving mode that we've all been taught. Focus on the problem, but what happens is when you over-focus, your reality just gets distorted. So the key is maintaining good judgment, right? By maintaining a focus in your field, your visual field, becoming aware of all the facts that are arising, right? These facts, of course, are impersonal facts that arise all the time. So how do we maintain sort of this positive outlook? Well, we do it through positive reframing. So now I'm talking about positive reframing because I'm saying reframe because, first of all, because human beings, we don't care for change. Change is a problem. You have to realize our brains, our neurons, they lay down tracks, right? And we sort of adapt to our current environment. And if in an ever-changing environment, we have to always be changing our tracks in our mind for better adaptation, and to be fit in our environment. I'm taking a lot of cues from biology and Darwinian evolution, okay? So we do that through positive reframing. Now, it often quite appears as the world impersonally turns that things work against our self-interest, or particularly our long self-interest. And yeah, it's the case. And, we're continually adapting. And so long as you have enough energy through exercise to take action, and you're sufficiently aware and thoughtful, you can deal with those problems. But here's the thing: when it comes to managing your emotions, quite often you get wrapped around the axle about a certain problem, right? And what it does is you focus your attention on it. It ends up distorting your perceptions. And it's important to sort of get out of that mode as soon as you can. And you can do it through positive reframing. Like I mentioned, you make your best decisions when you're in a good mood, when you're relatively content and happy and at peace You make the best decisions for your long-term self-interest, and that's key. So the question is, so what is this positive reframing all about? Well, there's reality, and I'm going to visualize that using the image of the Earth rotating on its axis. Imagine in my hand, the Earth is rotating on its axis. That's objective reality. It's impersonal, it's ever-changing, and your job is to just stay alive on this planet that's rotating. So, but there are changes that occur, and you and 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 how you frame those changes, your perspective is essentially a layer of stories, right? And there's a distinction between what's actually happening and the story that you tell yourself. And this is why my focus is on narrative all the time, right? Because it's about your belief system. I mean, that's how you that's your beliefs are essentially your narrative about what's going on in the world. And it's essentially a coating on top of reality. It's like the frosting on a cake, right? There's reality, and then there are your beliefs about reality. And so there's a difference. There's a difference. There's reality, and then there are your beliefs about reality. And the better job you do at sort of recognizing the differences between reality and your interpretation of reality, the more at peace you will become. Yeah. Now, why? Nature is neutral. So, these are just changes that occur impersonally. So the question is, how do you engage in the positive reframing that you need to engage in? A lot of these psychological needs are subjective. I know people think about quite often their need, what they want, what they desire, what they prefer. They think about them in terms of their inflexibility. But inflexibility is a dangerous path. Flexibility is what you want. You want to develop a flexible perspective, right? A I talked about this before, multi-theoretical understanding, multi-theoretical perspective of the world. It's essential. It's essential that your perspective be flexible. And what's great about it is that these perspectives are subjective by definition. And you might think, well, aren't there examples of rigid perceptions out there? Oh, yeah. Like morality, for example, moral codes, right? Ethics, right? Isn't there such thing as an objective ethics? You might ask me. And I'll say no. In fact, all ethics and morality is subjective. It just is. Now, what's the basis of ethics and morality? Well, it really starts out with preferences. It starts out with, this is what I like. This is what I'd like to happen. This is what I want. And eventually those turn into shoulds, coulds, woulds, musts, duties, right? This is where duties come from, right? In the beginning, it starts with what I'd like, what I prefer, what I desire. And then as those firm up, they get turned into what I want. And they get into shoulds and musts and have tos. And they create duties, right? And in fact, if you think about, say, the old world religions, like Christianity, Islam, right? The tribes of people, of ancient people that lived 2,000 years ago, in order to survive, they had desires, needs, wants, preferences, and it's sort of a collective. This is the collective map that they use to get their needs met, their physical and their psychological needs, and naturally they wrote them down, they put it in language and in their culture, in their ritual, tradition. And they start becoming static, right? They become fixed. Thou shalt not kill. right? That's basically at bottom, a person said, they talked to another person, this idea of us killing each other all the time, let's try not to do it because that's not good for the tribe long term. Yeah, there was some agreement in general about, I don't like it when my uncle gets murdered because he stepped on this guy's foot. And oh yeah, let's make a rule in our tribe. And then of course these rules get enforced by security, police, and then military, right? They get enshrined in constitutions. But at base, all of morality can just boil down to society's wants and an individual's wants. And it's just how they morph over time. And that's true for all of the wisdom literature. All of the wisdom literature that exists, and I'm referring to all the religions, are just that. Individual desires and preferences that ended up getting really, really fixed in our culture and in our mind. And it's a lot of cultural things too about the nuclear family, what being in a loving relationship or a romantic relationship is all about. Again, those are just all preferences. They all originated. There's nothing objectively real about any of it. It is 100% subjective. Okay. Now it's not entirely subjective in the sense that, well, it all bears on objectively meeting our basic needs. So, yeah. But again, these rules are completely all made up preferences of people in different contexts. That's why morality is contextual. As a rule, morality is contextual. That gives you an indication about how changing it is and how it's not objective. If morality was objective, it would not be contextual. Not necessarily. There are themes. There are themes that have been consistent over the millennia, and it's not that those themes are objective. It's just probably has to do with the physiology of human beings. For example, human beings need food and drink. We have biological needs we need to care for, and any morality associated with food and drink that seems to be fixed. They're linked to our physiology. Also, pain is a good example. A lot of pain is painful, and it's a feature of our skin, right? And so our nervous system creates certain kinds of reality, creates certain kind of morality, right? So anyway, it's actually the thing about ethics and morality is it's a side point. All right. I guess that's what I'm trying to convey. I mean, it's important. It helps you meet your physical and psychological needs. But when it comes to the purpose, meaning, and secret of life, it's an aside. What really is important is maintaining your attitude in the midst of change. I've spoken about this before. Life is all about how you manage the undesirable fact. I've got a finger here. The undesirable fact. So imagine my finger is the undesirable fact. So how do you manage the undesirable fact as a human being, right? It's about, well, first of all, being active in your surveying of the undesirable fact, getting to learn about it, right? And sort of developing skills to manage the undesirable fact. And the secret of life, really, the rubber hits the road. And the secret of life about how you deal with the undesirable fact, the obstacle in the way. There's actually a good book called The Obstacle in the Way. I suggest you read it, about Stoicism. But your life really will turn out completely in reference to how you manage the undesirable fact, the inconvenient truth. I don't know how other ways to say it, but the things that upset you or bother you in the world, right? How you manage them. And that's the secret of life. The secret of life is how you manage the undesirable fact. And the answer is positive reframing. So there are actually a lot of resources that you can draw upon to help you in your journey of positive reframing. And I'll just mention a few, and there are a lot. I think the first and most comprehensive source of training for positive reframing is the field of psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy. So if there's any one place for you to go, if you're having problems or trouble, I ask that you seek out strategies for improved positive reframing or just a better reframing through cognitive behavioral therapy. But there are other therapies within that realm. There is acceptance and commitment therapy. There's so many other kinds of therapies out there that are just wonderful. Definitely review them. They're important. It is the secret of life, right? There are other methods. There are other related ways for you to improve your strategies for positive reframing. There are ideas that are surrounding things like nonviolent communication is quite helpful when it comes to positive reframing. Motivational interviewing is helpful when it comes to positive reframing. Other resources that you can obtain through positive reframing. I have recently read a book that I quite enjoyed that relates to something called affirmative AI. Affirmative. I had it a minute ago. Affirmative inquiry. So there's another source to help you with positive reframing. So positive reframing is all about adjusting the beliefs you have about the world. And that is really the key, the secret to life. So now, I think there are a lot of myths related to positive reframing. I think one of the most potent myths out there is that somehow a positive story is less true than a negative story. I think that there is truth inside positive stories and there's truth inside negative stories. There's also truth inside neutral stories. The kind of story that will help you survive and thrive and flourish in the world is the truth within your positive stories. And the fact is that you can weave stories through creativity and imagination that use helpful, positive, uplifting, empowering metaphors. And you can infuse those stories with as much factual information as you possibly can. Earlier, I mentioned I was a lover of reality, and being positive doesn't necessarily bar you from being focused on reality. In fact, they're entirely compatible. In fact, in every situation, there are good facts and there are bad facts and there are neutral facts. And quite often, if you focus on the good facts and pursue carefully and with focus those good facts, I think you will override quite often the influence of the negative facts, the bad facts. For example, let's say when it comes to health, continually focusing on good health will not make you sicker because unless of course you ignore some warning signals I'm not asking you to go so far as to ignore warning signals. Certainly, uh, do your best to manage the bad facts about your health as much as you can. I mean, people with, say, diabetes can live incredibly happy, healthy lives. People with cancer can live happy, healthy lives, despite the fact that they have cancer or their pancreas beta cells are not producing insulin. People can be quadriplegics and live happy, fulfilled, meaningful lives, so long as that they are rather good at positive reframing. What's great about the human mind is that a healthy mind does a lot of the work for you, and that's what's great about the human mind. It adapts all the bad facts, so to speak. Well, the human body, the human brain just adapts. If those bad facts stick around, they just become part of the underlying environment that you're in. And eventually your brain ignores them. If they're unchanging, those bad facts, for example, you not having arms or legs, just become the new norm. Okay, what can I do now that I have no arms or legs? You wake up the next morning, you got to ask yourself, well, how can I enjoy my life in the moment without arms or legs? And you continually ask that question again and again and again, and your brain will answer, oh, we can use video teleconferencing to get around, or we can use the power of, I don't know, maybe you're really good looking. Maybe you're an amazing writer or speaker, or maybe you're good at playing the harmonica. I don't know. But there are ways that you can meet all of your basic needs and your psychological needs despite being a quadriplegic. Absolutely. Despite having cancer, despite having diabetes. So you just need to manage those. They just become routine aspects of your life if they're persistent. So anyway, that's what I believe is the secret of life. It really is all about positive reframing. Oh, here's another resource that you can go to for positive reframing, and that is Byron Katie's work. Loving What Is, her 4 questions and the turnarounds. Again, those are just ways to be creative when it comes to being flexible when it comes to your perspective about, what's important to the world, what's important in the world. Really, these stories are how you meet your psychological needs. What are your psychological needs? If you think about it, your psychological needs are rather subjective. That's right. Your psychological needs, think about it. If you think about it, for example, pre-verbal man, right? There was a part of our human history when people didn't speak, right? We didn't have language. So at this time, our lives were really simple. Our psychological needs were not that deep, Certainly we had, we have drives toward being social animals and things like that. I have a sense, like before culture was really had a strong hold on us in our pre-verbal days, I have a feeling that meeting our psychological needs was relatively easy. I look at dogs, for example. Dogs, highly social creatures. Dogs have psychological needs, and they have needs for comfort and social needs, friendship. They have needs for leadership, and really, that covers the spectrum of needs of dogs. If you give them those things, they'll be happy and satisfied. as human beings develop more of a neocortex over tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, then our psychological needs become more complex. And but they are also rather limited. As culture has gotten a lot more intricate, our needs have basically sort of exploded, but they're all psychological needs, right? And they all can be managed. There are people who can live perfectly happy, healthy lives in jail, even in solitary confinement. The human brain adapts to its environment, and psychological needs are largely subjective. They can be modified. Thankfully, my guess, Emily, is that you'll never live in a time where you've got to really sort of streamline your psychological needs, right? I have a feeling you'll be able to sort of, develop a great variety of psychological needs and have them met in the future. I have a feeling that the life that you lead has the potential to be a lot more satisfying and happy than the life I lead. I have a feeling that your life will be a lot more complex than mine ever was, and you've got the most potential for enjoyment and happiness, more potential than even I, in sort of creating and managing and satisfying all of your psychological needs, which I think will be a big deal, even a bigger deal for me. I mean, I have my own series of psychological needs that I try to take care of, and I'm really, truly just, I'm really doing the best I can in managing them, and positive reframing is helping a lot. And what's also helping is I'm able to sort of minimize the say the number and intensity of my psychological needs. And thankfully it's the case that it's also, a lot of it is quite subjective. All right, so I think I really touched on the most important aspects of it. That is the secret to life: positive reframing. And when I talk about the meaning of life, the meaning of life comes from the stories that we talk about. Human beings are meaning makers, right? Human beings tell stories. It's our narrative. That's our reality. Our reality is our narrative. And that's why it's so important to engage in positive reframing, so that we can have the best attitude, and we can be in the best frame of mind to make healthy choices for ourselves in the future. Now, of course, the meaning of life is whatever we want it to be, right? The meaning of life has a lot to do with our belief system. It has a lot to do with the meaning that we imbue into our external reality, our external world. These are the stories that we tell, the narrative that we tell ourselves. And it's really important to use words that are associated with feelings that are helpful and not hurtful, right? These words are about connotations. That becomes important. Creating meaning you want to create a meaning that's uplifting and empowering and energizes. You want one that a narrative that you can feel proud of, and one that not only helps yourself but helps others too, that sort of provides a service to others. Others are struggling, and they can help you on your journey. And definitely, in fact, work jointly with other people. Work hand in hand with others, arm in arm with others. Work shoulder to shoulder with other people by telling your narrative and finding connections between your narrative and their narrative, create meaning with a group of people, and using positive reframing to help assist that process, you'll do fantastic. And then there's purpose, right? The purpose of life. Again, just like meaning, it is incredible. It is subjective. The purpose of human life is also subjective. Again, the purpose of your life it's a story about the future, right? That's what a purpose is. It's a story about the future. It's what you hope the future will be, right? According to your basket of values that are important to you. It's also according to the strengths that you have that are part of your personality that you almost develop unthinkingly. You develop strengths and abilities depending on, say, the resources available in your body and in your mind. And, thankfully, the world is such that we have the freedom to decide our purpose. We have the freedom to decide our meaning. And so long as we use the secret of life, which is, like I mentioned, positive reframing, how to get your psychological needs met, so long as you're doing that on a regular basis. Now, it takes effort. If positive reframing and sort of maintaining a positive attitude were easy, then everybody would do it. It's sort of like, I'm talking about like weightlifting, like exercise. In an earlier day, I might talk about how important exercise is, and exercise is critically important. I would say exercise is responsible for 50 to 50%, maybe 80% of the happiness that I experience in my world. Maybe not. Actually, exercise is critical for my happiness. I'd give it about a 50% of my happiness comes from how I move my body. Remember, the cerebellum is highly linked to the reward system of the brain. A big chunk of happiness for me comes from my reflection on my behavior and how my virtuous behavior. I think back about my virtuous behavior and it makes me proud and happy. And a lot of satisfaction and happy feelings come to me as a result of that. And then I would say a good 10 to 15% of my happiness comes from my positive reframing efforts. Essentially, it's also about being patient and enjoying the moment through pausing and care, self-control. There's what I'd call hygge. Hygge is that Danish word. It's about appreciating, savoring the beauty of the world around us. And, a lot of happiness comes from that. So what I'm talking about is happiness. It comes in a lot of different forms. There's hedonic happiness, which is basically that joy that comes from me savoring the world and hygge. And then there's eudaimonistic happiness, right? And that's happiness that comes from considering my behavior, my virtuous character, the strengths of my personality. As I review them in my mind, I get a lot of happiness. It's big, strong. This is self-righteousness, is what it is. It's a source of happiness, and it's critically important for me. I get about 30 to 40% of my happiness from eudaimonistic happiness. This I guess we could call it's not necessarily self-righteousness, but it's like pride of action, pride in my own behavior by virtue of my strengths. And then a big chunk of happiness is just physical happiness. It comes from things like dancing, right? It comes from things like moving my body at the gym, through swimming and running and weightlifting. Big chunk of happiness comes from that. You could call that physical happiness. My muscles and my body feel energized, and I'm willing to tackle the world and those endorphins are moving in my brain, and also those neurotransmitters are helping me exert positive control over my body and mind. I've got a lot of self-control now as a result of exercise, because I have the energy the energy that has been sort of reinforcing my willpower. Yeah, all that comes from exercise. If that's something that's important to you, which it probably is, one of my most strong traits is self-control, is self-discipline, self-regulation. This is where I get a lot of the pleasure that I receive in the world. It's how I take action, the kind of action I want to take. And that's all made possible through the energy that's liberated through exercise. So I've gone through the different forms of happiness. I've gone through resources that you can use to engage in positive reframing. You can do a lot of brainstorming sessions through journaling. Journaling is quite important. Planning can also be quite helpful in helping you schedule your exercise sessions. You could use techniques like the Pomodoro technique to take 5 minutes or even just 2 minutes to do a reframing around even just the present moment. What if you could be 10% happier by reframing the present moment and doing it in a 10-minute exercise or a 2-minute exercise? It's worth it. It's worth it. So that's it. So, Emily, I hope you enjoyed my presentation today about the secret of life, the meaning of life, the purpose of life, and how they're all related through narrative and the satisfying of psychological and physical needs. This is all in an effort to help you lead the most satisfying, enjoyable, and peaceful and happy life. And it's entirely possible. It's entirely possible every moment of every day, no matter how the impersonal world unfolds. And it will unfold. It'll unfold in surprising ways through car accidents and lottery winning and finding a girlfriend or a boyfriend and then losing that girlfriend or boyfriend. Change is continuous. There's going to be money that arises and then money that falls away. There's going to be loved ones that arise and then loved ones who fall away. And, it's important to sort of manage all that through positive reframing and exercise and focus on what is good, maintaining a good attitude so you don't over focus on the negative and get wrapped up on the minutia of life and over focus on a single area of negativity and end up just distorting your whole perception. That is all that is about is insecurity. Is essentially insecurity. Anyway, might as well continue. I read this book recently called The Happiness Makeover by MJ Ryan, and I'm right now going through passages that I highlighted in the book, and I'll take a few minutes to do that again, do that some more. So on page 7 of MJ Ryan's The Happiness Makeover, I highlighted this passage, and the passage reads, "Since Aristotle, philosophers have distinguished between hedonistic happiness, happiness as a feeling of pleasure or contentment, and eudaimonistic happiness, which arises out of satisfaction with one's actions and character." Yeah, I just talked about that. So the next passage that I highlighted was on page 7, and it reads, "Recently, positive psychology has made a similar distinction between pleasure and gratification, noticing that since pleasure is fleeting and gratification longer lasting, it's better to pursue gratification to experience authentic happiness. Yeah, this is what I was talking about as it relates to eudaimonistic happiness. That's actually quite long term. For example, if I'm proud of my behavior, I can be proud of my behavior in the present, and I can be proud of my behavior an hour from now. I can be proud of my behavior a day or a year from now. And in fact, that pride, if I think about it in a constructive and maybe amplified way, I can feel a lot of happiness, and I can just be infused with happiness throughout my day because of that action I took in the past. Or it could be a strength of my personality that I'm really proud about. So yeah, that could be a strong source of happiness. Yeah, that's right. That's a really good point. Pleasure lasts only so long. In fact, it's actually somewhat disappointing how short-lived pleasure is. One of the things that I find great pleasure in eating is chocolate frosting, chocolate cake frosting. I love chocolate cake frosting. But here's the thing. It's got a lot of calories. And, I'm willing to take the hit, right? There's a trade-off. Happiness for calories. And I'm more than happy to do that every once in a while. And the thing, though, is that it's so short-lived, all right? The spoon goes into my mouth. My tongue moves the frosting around. There's a moment, a few seconds of enjoyment, 5, 10, 15 seconds, maybe 20 seconds of enjoyment, deep enjoyment, satisfaction. And then it goes away. That's 15 seconds. That's 20 seconds of pleasure. And then it's gone. Yeah, it's fleeting. It's powerful. Mm-hmm. It's, it's important. These hits of pleasure are important, necessary, and worth doing. And they're short term. Now, say pride for me having graduated from high school, the pride that I feel from that accomplishment is everlasting. I still feel pride even today. It's been how many years since I've graduated from high school? 30 years since I've graduated from high school. I still feel a deep sense of pride for having graduated. I do. I have a deep sense of pride about how I handled myself as a young teenager. Mm-hmm. I have pride about even playing video games and how focused I was on enjoying the pleasure of playing video games. Donkey Kong comes to mind, and Miss Pac-Man. Oh yeah, that's great stuff. And with memories like that, I can sort of spend hours and days, even now, 30 years later, just savoring the happiness that relates to my good behavior. So anyway, keep that in mind. It's better. It's now I could try to continuously get happiness from eating chocolate, and that will have limited utility for me. Because it only lasts for 20 seconds. Come on, it only lasts for 20 seconds. Okay, so the next passage that I highlighted is a passage on page 8. It says, you need to pursue in your own makeover. You need to pursue in your own makeover and to cultivate the thinking that will lead you there. There are many paths to happiness, that grand mistress of ceremonies in the dance of life. Yeah. So anyway, that's the end of just the introduction of the quotes of the introduction of that book. I still have like 30 chapters of that book to go over, but we're done with the introduction. Woo! Okay. So the subtitle for this section is that there are many paths to happiness, and there are. I've gone over a few of them. So one highlight is on page 8, and the text reads, people who are happy are more appreciative, he told me. They take action on the things that they can in their lives and don't worry about the rest, and they smile more. So yeah, So this is about, taking action when you can. A lot of life is about waiting, right? We're always waiting. We're waiting to die. I know, I don't know about you, but I'm just waiting to die. I'm just hanging out here on the planet, waiting for my life to be extinguished. But there's more to that. I wait in traffic. I wait in lines at the grocery store. And there are two ways to wait. There are two ways to wait. One is to wait and feel miserable. You can wait miserably. You just can. And the other option is to wait happily. There is a way to wait happily. Like even if you're waiting for an airplane to board an airplane at the airport, you can wait happily. You can wait and be content. Wait and be peaceful. Or you can wait and be angry, upset, sad. Life in a way is about waiting. And, we have a choice. There are two ways to have cancer. You can have cancer and be joyful, and you can have cancer and be miserable. While you're taking care of yourself and your cancer diagnosis and taking care of your body, you can be you have the choice, really the freedom to be happy or miserable. If you have diabetes, if you're obese, if you're quadriplegic, there are two ways to be a quadriplegic. You can be a miserable quadriplegic, or you can be a happy quadriplegic. It's your choice. You can also choose the way of negative reframing if you want. There are a lot of people who choose negative reframing, and there are a lot of reasons to choose negative reframing. A lot of people are advocates of negative reframing because they've been caught up in this problem-solving idea where they focus on the negative because they believe that in the long term it'll be helpful, right? And, I think it's arguable, it's debatable about the marginal benefit of being negative all the time. I have a feeling that it'll work to your disservice. This, like I mentioned, a focus on the negative distorts your perceptions. You get over-focused. Like, here's a good example. In the news, right, we have a president that's really focused on border security, right? The problem, right? Problem solving is important. It has utility to problem solve. But this is like, what's going on is like an over-focus on border security that is unhealthy and does not promote happiness, or it's quite unhealthy. There are two ways to focus on border security. You can focus on it and be miserable, or you can focus on it and be happy, making decisions, balancing baskets of values, upholding standards, and you could do so in a way that's joyful. There is a joyful way to handle border security. There really is. And you can do it shoulder to shoulder with intelligent people who are focused on finding solutions. You could do it. You can find border security, and you can use goodwill between nations, goodwill between people, goodwill between states to focus on joint problems of border security. We can crack open people's hearts for love and enjoyment and the rule of law and justice, and inspire people. You can inspire people to respect borders. It's possible. It is entirely possible. Or we can do it like we're doing it now, and that's focus on border security and be miserable. There are alternate ways. There are a lot of ways. So, Emily, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Let me finish by saying how much I love you. how important you are in my life, how I'm so thankful that you are in my life, how, in a way, you were created by me. And I'm really proud personally of my creation. And, you know, you were a twinkle in my eye at one point. I remember, there was a point in my life when I made a decision. I said, Miguel, I want to create another human life. Maybe I didn't use those terms, but as life unfolded, you were the result. And I'm so proud of my creation. And I am so pleased that you're there and living a happy, healthy life, and that I am a part of it, and that we are working shoulder to shoulder to help you grow and mature into the lovely, spellbinding, wonderful woman that I know you can become. I love you, girl. Peace out.